Your Scottish surname is a map, not a metaphor, not a romantic idea. An actual map, one that, if you know how to read it, will tell you within a few miles where your family came from, what language they spoke, what landscape shaped them, and which of Scotland's great divisions they belong to. Today I'm going to show you how to read that map. We're going to divide Scotland into its historical regions, explain which surnames came from where and why, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what your Scottish surname is telling you about, where your family has been for the last 800 years. Scotland has a line running through it, not a political border, a linguistic and cultural one. It's called the Highland Boundary Fault, and it runs roughly from Helensburgh in the west to Stonehaven in the northeast. On one side of that line, the Gaelic-speaking Highlands and Islands, dominated by the Mac surnames. On the other side, the Lowlands, the Borders, and the Northeast, where English, Scots, and Norman French left their marks. According to a clan map analysis of the Collins Scotland of Old Clan Map, which represents Scotland during the reign of James VI, around 1566 to 1625, of the 195 clans shown, only around 28 bore the Mac or Mech prefix. The remaining 165 or more did not. This tells us something fundamental. The Mac names are concentrated in one specific part of Scotland. The rest of the country produced different kinds of surnames entirely. Scottish Origines research has found that approximately 20% of Scottish surnames are exclusive to a single location within Scotland. For those surnames, the map is almost exact. To understand where your surname comes from, we need to understand 6 distinct regions of Scotland, each of which produced its own distinctive surnames for its own distinctive historical reasons. Let's begin in the northwest. Region 1, the Western Highlands and Hebrides, the land of the Mac, where the Gael came from Ireland. If your surname begins with Mac or Mech and your family traces to Scotland, there is a very strong probability that your ancestors came from the western coast, from Argyll, the Hebrides, Skye, or the mainland coast facing the Atlantic. Here is why. The Gaelic kingdom of Dalriada had roots on both sides of the water between Ireland and Scotland. The North Channel between Antrim and Argyll is only 19 kilometers wide. Around the year 500 AD, according to Britannica and traditional historical accounts, the ruling family of the Irish Dalriada established their principal seat in Argyll on the Scottish mainland, making Duned their chief stronghold. These people were Gaels, speakers of an early form of Gaelic. Over the following centuries, Gaelic spread eastward and northward from this western base, eventually becoming the dominant language of much of Scotland. The Mac prefix is Gaelic, from Mac meaning son of. MacDonald means son of Donald, MacLeod means son of Leod, Mackenzie means son of Kenneth. These are Gaelic patronymics, and their concentration on the west coast and in the Hebrides directly reflects the Gaelic settlement pattern that began with Dalriada 1500 years ago. Surnames from this region, MacDonald, the most numerous of all Highland surnames, centered on Islay, Kintyre, and the western seaboard. Their heartland was Islay, where the lords of the Isles held their court at Finlaggan. MacLeod concentrated on Skye and Harris in the outer Hebrides. Their chiefs have lived at Dunvegan Castle on Skye for over 800 years. Campbell, centered in Argyll, the very heartland of the original Dalriada settlement. Inverary Castle, seat of the Dukes of Argyll, sits in the middle of their historic territory. Maclean and Maclean, the island of Mull and the surrounding western coast. Their chiefs held Duart Castle on Mull. MacNeil and MacNeil concentrated on the island of Barra in the Outer Hebrides. The MacNeils of Barra claim to be one of the oldest Gaelic dynasties in Scotland. If your surname is one of these, your family's roots reach back to the Gaelic world of the western seaboard, a world connected more to Ireland across the water than to Edinburgh in the east. Region 2, the Northern Highlands and Islands. Norse-Gaelic borderlands where Vikings became Scots. Move north and east from the Hebrides and you enter a different world, the far north of Scotland, where the Norse presence was not just a historical episode, but a cultural transformation. The Vikings settled heavily in Caithness, Sutherland, and the Northern Isles, Orkney and Shetland, from the 8th century onward. In Orkney and Shetland, the Norse language, Norn, survived until the 18th century. Even today, the dialects of these islands carry Norse vocabulary. This Norse presence left its mark on surnames in three ways. First, some surnames preserve Norse personal names directly, like MacLeod from the Norse Ljóðir and Sutherland from the Norse Söderland. Second, many place names in the far north are Norse, which means surnames derived from these place names are also Norse in origin. Surnames like Gunn, from the Norse personal name Gunnar, concentrated in Caithness and Sutherland. Third, the far north produced surnames that reflect the mixed Norse-Gaelic culture that emerged over centuries of contact. Names like Mackay, concentrated in Sutherland and Caithness, one of the great clans of the far north, and Sinclair, which actually derives from St. Clair sur Epte in Normandy, brought north by Norman settlers but firmly rooted in Caithness. Surnames from this region, Gunn, concentrated in Caithness and Sutherland, derive from the Norse personal name Gunni, from Old Norse Gunnar meaning war or battle. The clan traces its roots to Gunni, grandson of Sweyn Sleifson, described in the Orkneyinga saga as the ultimate Viking. Mackay, one of the great clans of the far north, centered in Sutherland. Their territory was called Strathnavar. Sinclair, Norman in ultimate origin but deeply rooted in Caithness. The Sinclairs held Gurnago Castle on the Caithness coast, Ross, centered in Easter Ross, and the Black Isle, the peninsula between the Cromarty and Dornoch Firths. Monroe, concentrated in Easter Ross, the clan whose chiefs held the strategically important lands between Inverness and the north. If your surname comes from this region, your family lived where Scotland met the Norse world, a frontier zone where two of the great northern European cultures merged over centuries. Region 3, the Central and Eastern Highlands, the Gaelic heartland, Perthshire, Inverness-shire, Aberdeenshire, the central corridor of Scotland, running from Inverness south through the Great Glen to Perthshire, is the heartland of the Highland clan system. These are the territories where the great clans built their power bases, where Gaelic culture was strongest, and where the clan system, as we recognize it, was most fully developed. The surnames from this region tend to be either Mac names derived from specific ancestors or territorial names derived from the landscapes of the region, the lochs, glens, and mountains that define the Central Highlands. Fraser, centered in Inverness-shire with two main branches, the Frasers of Lovat in the north and the Frasers of Falorth in the northeast. Castle Fraser in Aberdeenshire and Beaufort Castle near Beaulieu are their principal seats. Cameron, centered in Lochaber, the area around Ben Nevis and Loch Isle in the Western Highlands. Their chiefs are known as the Camerons of Lochiel. Macintosh, centered in Inverness-shire, chiefs of the Clan Chattan Confederation, one of the most complex clan groupings in Scotland. Robertson or Donashade, centered in Perthshire, specifically the area of Rannoch and Tummel. This is the territory we discussed in our oldest surnames video, the oldest documented Scottish clan. Murray, derived from the ancient kingdom of Moray, centered on the fertile coastal strip of the Moray Firth. The name means from Moray, a territorial surname of the most direct kind. If your surname comes from this region, your family inhabited the geographic core of Highland Scotland, the landscapes of castle, glen, and mountain that define the popular image of the country. Region 4, the Northeast, Aberdeenshire and Angus, the lowland fringe where Gaelic gave way to Scots. The northeast of Scotland, Aberdeenshire, Angus, and the Mearns occupies a fascinating middle ground. It sits east of the Highland line, which means it was historically lowland in language and culture, speaking Scots rather than Gaelic. But it also sits on the northern fringe of that lowland world, close enough to the Highland Mountains to have clan connections. The surnames of this region tend to be territorial, derived from specific places in Aberdeenshire, or occupational names reflecting the farming and trading economy of the northeast coast. Gordon derived from the lands of Gordon and Berkshire originally, but the family became thoroughly northeast Scottish after acquiring Aberdeenshire lands in the 14th century through marriage. Their power base centered on Huntly Castle in Aberdeenshire. Forbes, a territorial name from the lands of Forbes in Aberdeenshire on the River Don. The Forbes clan was the dominant family of the Don Valley, Irvine or Irving from the River Irvine in Ayrshire originally, but also strongly associated with northeast Scotland. Keith from the lands of Keith in Lothian, but the family became the hereditary Mareschals of Scotland and centered on the northeast. The Keiths held Dunnottar Castle, the dramatic cliff-top fortress south of Stonehaven. Burnett, associated with the Burnetts of Leys in Aberdeenshire, whose chiefs held Craith's Castle on the River Dee, still standing today and now in the care of the National Trust for Scotland. If your surname comes from this region, your family lived in Scotland's farming northeast, a world of market towns, coastal fishing communities, and fertile river valleys where Gaelic culture was present but Scots speech dominated. Region 5, the Lowlands, Edinburgh, Fife, Stirling, and Glasgow, the Norman heart where Scotland met England, The lowlands of Scotland, the Central Belt, Fife, the Lothians, and the area around Glasgow produce Scotland's most diverse range of surnames. This is where the Norman influence was strongest, where royal power was centered, and where trade, church, and law created a surname-generating environment very different from the clan system of the Highlands. According to the Scotsman's analysis of Scottish surnames, the Lowlands produced occupational names Smith, Wright, Baxter, Webster, and Slater. Patronymics with the son suffix Robertson, Davidson, Wilson, Thompson, and Henderson all formed on the English model of son of rather than the Gaelic Mac. Territorial names from lowland places, Hamilton from the lands of Hamilton in Lanarkshire, Douglas from the Douglas Water in Lanarkshire. Norman French names, Bruce, Hay, Sinclair, Graham, Stewart. The Lowlands also produce Scotland's most common surnames overall. According to the Scotsman's analysis, Smith, Brown, Wilson, Thompson, and Robertson are all concentrated in the Lowlands and all reflect the English and Norman influences that shaped lowland Scotland from the 12th century onward. Key surnames from this region: Hamilton, centered in Lanarkshire, seat of the Dukes of Hamilton. The town of Hamilton takes its name from the family. Wallace, derived from the Old French and Middle English Wallis, meaning Welshman or foreigner. William Wallace, Scotland's most famous warrior, was almost certainly from Renfrewshire. Scott, centered in the Borders and the Teviotdale Valley, with their principal seat at Branksholme Tower. Lindsay, from the lands of Lindsay in Lincolnshire, England originally, then firmly established in Angus and the Lothians. If your surname comes from this region, your family was part of the diverse, cosmopolitan world of lowland Scotland, a world shaped by Norman law, Church Latin, Scots speech, and the constant contact with England that defined Scotland's political history. Region 6, the Borders, the surname crucible, where raiding made names. The Scottish Borders, the area of Roxburghshire, Selkirkshire, Berwickshire, and Dumfriesshire along the English border, produce some of Scotland's most distinctive surnames, and the reason is unlike any other region on this list. The Borders produced its surnames through 3 centuries of systematic raiding. As we covered in our Border Reaver video, the families of the Anglo-Scottish border, the Armstrongs, Elliots, Maxwells, Johnstones, Scotts, Grahams, Kerrs, and Bells, created a surname culture unlike anything else in Britain. These were not clans in the Highland sense, they were riding families, kinship groups, whose loyalty was to the surname above all else. The critical thing to understand about border surnames is their geographic precision. The Armstrong family controlled Liddesdale, the Maxwell family controlled Annandale and the Western Marches, the Kerr family controlled Teviotdale, the Douglas family controlled the central borders before their power was broken in 1455. Armstrong, Liddesdale, the valley in Roxburghshire that was the most consistently lawless stretch of the entire border. 3,000 Armstrong horsemen at their peak. Elliot and Elliot, Liddesdale and Teviotdale. 4 spellings, one of Scotland's most documented border families. Maxwell, Annandale and Dumfriesshire dominant on the Western Marches, Johnstone and Johnstone. Annandale, hereditary enemies of the Maxwells, as we covered in our Border Reavers video. Kerr and Carr, Teviotdale, centered on Fernie Hurst Castle near Jedburgh. Bell, the Scottish Western March, centered between Carlisle and the Western Border Hills. If your surname comes from this region, your family was part of the most distinctive and most studied surname culture in Britain. The border surnames don't just tell you where your family came from, they tell you how your family survived. The map in your name, how to read your own surname. Now that we've covered all 6 regions, let me give you the tools to read your own surname. If your surname begins with Mac or Mech, your family almost certainly originates from the western coast, the Hebrides, or the central and northern Highlands, the Gaelic-speaking world. The further north and west your family traces, the more Norse influence you may also have. If your surname ends in son, your family almost certainly originates from the Lowlands or the Northeast, the English-influenced part of Scotland where patronymics followed the English model rather than the Gaelic Mac. If your surname is a place name, look up that place in Scotland. The surname very likely derived from the place. Your ancestors either owned it, farmed it, or came from it. If your surname is Norman French, your family arrived in Scotland with the Norman settlement of the 12th century, invited north by David I, and almost certainly settled in the Lowlands or Northeast first, before potentially moving into Highland territories later. If your surname is on the Border Reaver list, your family's territory is precisely documented. Clan maps of the border families show exactly which valleys each family controlled. And here's the final piece of the map. Scottish Origines research has found that approximately 20% of Scottish surnames are exclusive to a single location. For those names, the geographic origin is almost exact, not a region, but a specific valley, a specific parish, a specific glen. The research tool at Scottish Origines, originusmaps.com, allows you to search your specific surname and see, based on Y-DNA results from thousands of people with Scottish ancestry, exactly where in Scotland that surname cluster is most concentrated. That is as close as genealogical research can currently get to showing you, on a map, exactly where your family came from. 6 regions, 6 different stories, and 1 language connecting all of them, the language of surnames. The Mac of MacDonald carries 1,500 years of Gaelic history from the western seaboard. The Son suffix in Robertson carries the English-influenced lowland world. The Armstrong carries 300 years of border raiding in the surname itself, and the surname Sutherland carries the memory of a Viking navigator looking south from Orkney and naming a land he saw across the water. Every Scottish surname is a map. You just needed to know how to read it. Type your surname in the comments. I'll try to tell you which region it comes from and what that region's story is. If this video was worth your time, a like genuinely helps the channel. Subscribe for more deep dives into the bloodlines that shaped history. See you in the next one.